Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Awaken to Your Soul Path. I am your host, Barbara, and today I am joined by the wonderful Tracey Brown, and we are going to be talking about disrupting the status quo so that you can blaze your own trail. And not everybody will immediately understand what it means, but it's where you do not want to conform to what everybody else is conforming, and you just want to do your thing in general. And I've been looking forward to talking about this because we are in changing times right now. And a lot of us that are more energy sensitive are really feeling it. We're feeling the effects. It can be very tired, emotions all over the place, things that are happening, old stuff that pops up that you thought you had dealt with long ago. And it's all part of the thing. So this is a very active topic right now, and I love exploring it with you. So thank you so much for being here today, Tracey, to talk about this.
Thank you so much for having me, Barbara. I am so excited for us to have this conversation as well. It is, like you said, it's something that is really very active in the collective consciousness at the moment. And I think it's one of those things that the more awareness we bring to it and the more that we talk about it, the more that we can actually continue to shift and change all of that energy and move away from the status quo and into a new paradigm that reflects the collective consciousness in a much more accurate and much more heart-led and heart-centered way.
Exactly. Yes. So I love that we are talking about this because it's so necessary, and maybe it's a good place to start where we started looking at what is the status quo and why do we need to disrupt it.
Yes. Oh my goodness. So there are lots of ways that people think of the status quo at the moment. I over these past few years, have been recognizing more about what the societal expectations and what everybody is feeling really stems back to patriarchal values that have been instilled in our society over hundreds and thousands of years. For those who might not be familiar with patriarchy, obviously it comes from that more male-dominated societal structures where, in general, women tend to be more suppressed, or a lot of the work I do is around the sister wound, the mother wound, and the witch wound, and the ways that that manifests for women in terms of, being pitted against each other in competition, or not feeling safe to speak up, or not being heard, or not listened to, or being made to feel guilt and shame about wanting more than what you're being offered, to actually ask for a seat at the table, to ask for equality even. And these values are just so deeply entwined in society that they are the status quo. It is just what we have expected for so long. And
Yes.
Women have been trying to shift these patterns as we have fought for equality and the right to vote with the suffragettes, and with feminism rising in the 60s and 70s, but the work still needs to be done. It's layers upon layers.
Yes, and it's not just women, it's of course also people with colored skin that are also fighting against the status quo, right? I often refer to these things also as the rules, the bullshit rules of life. So it's about the way things are supposed to be done, or the way you're supposed to be acting, or the things that are expected of you by society or by family. And it's also all of the things that we accept as true without even thinking for ourselves. Is this actually true? Do I agree with this? Is this true for me personally? Or am I just, hearing this from my parents all of the time, and now it becomes my truth because my parents always say it this way?
Exactly. And what you're saying, there are so many things to unpack here. It isn't just women, it's basically any marginalized group in society. So it can be, women, it can be people of color, it can be people with disabilities, it can be people who represent different genders or sexualities than mainstream status quo, heterosexual relationships. So it's any of those marginalized groups who over the course of history have been less desirable, less popular, less valued. And also what you were saying about how we are wanting to, sorry, I've just had a complete mental blank. There was something else that you said that I really wanted to touch on, and it's just gone.
It's the way things are supposed to be done, the things that your parents in society tell you about how
Yes.
to be, how to act.
Yes. So the other part of that is that we do need to question where these beliefs have come from, because over time, these beliefs are passed on, they're passed down through the generations. So it becomes generational cycles where these things are deeply embedded in our history. And we don't think to question them because it is the way that things have always been, which is like the definition of the status quo. And as we become more curious, as we become more aware, as we become more open to questioning, is this something that I truly believe? Is this something that resonates strongly for me? Or is this just something that I've been conditioned to believe? And we can start to make those conscious choices and recognize, actually, maybe I don't believe this, or maybe there are other perspectives that I should be considering. Maybe there are different ways to look at this situation. Then we actually get to start doing the work and unraveling these beliefs and shifting them and changing them. And that can be quite confronting for a lot of people, but it can also be really exciting because when we realize that we don't have to be stuck in the way that things have always been done, or that we have to continue holding on to beliefs that actually misalign with our own personal values, but that we are made to feel that we should follow these things, or we should believe these things, even though they don't feel good for us in our bodies. When we realize that we have the freedom to let those things go and not continue to carry that forward, that can be really exciting and really liberating.
Exactly. That is basically blazing your own trail, trailblazing, being a trailblazer. And one of the things that was true for me, how that showed up for me, was that people always expect you to have a good education, then prepare for a good job that you're probably going to have for the rest of your life, find a worthy partner, have your 2.3 children, buy your house with your white picket fence and your dog and maybe a cat, and then live happily ever after. Because that's how society works, and most of us have been taught that that's the way you should live your life, and make good smart choices, get a good education, find a good job, find a good partner, have great children, and have an awesome life. But for a lot of people, this is not true. This is not the way life looks. And for me, that's not how my life looks. And then I get these people that say, but you're almost 40. Shouldn't you be finding someone, marrying, children, right? Because, the time's ticking.
Yeah, it's funny that you should mention that story didn't resonate for you either. I actually, I lived that story, actually. I was one of those girls who got, I started dating my then husband. We're no longer together, but we, started dating straight out of high school when I was 18. I had my son just before I turned 25. So I was 24 when I had my first child, had 2 kids, got married, did all of the things right, according to the societal prescription for what was expected of women. I stayed at home, I raised my children, I was a full-time mom. I put my needs second to allow my husband to have the career while I raised the family. But then it turned out that didn't really end up working out for me in the end. Or rather, the relationship had its misalignments. And it turned out in the end, one of the catalysts for change for that was that I started to want more for my life. I wanted more than to just be. It wasn't that I didn't want to be at home with my kids. I love my kids, but as they grew older and they needed me less, and I remembered that I was a separate person and that I had separate goals, dreams, and desires of my own, that the more time I started being selfish or putting some of that priority back into myself and allowing myself to pursue what I wanted, the more friction there was in my marriage. And in the end, it wasn't possible for me to stay in that relationship because there was the levels of support and the room for growth weren't there, because the dynamic had shifted and we weren't equal or partners any longer. We were separate. And that process of going through that is actually something I just wrote a chapter for one of our books that we published recently in our Wounded Women series called Broken, actually deals with the breaking of those generational cycles and breaking that status quo, because we are, and it for me in my situation, it was never something that my family said to me, oh, you have to get married, you have to do these things.
No,
But it was just that knowledge that you just know. You just know these things. This is what you have to do. You get married, you stay married, you live till death do you part. And then when you end up making that decision to not do it until death do you part, you actually end up completely going against the grain of what everybody expects your life to look like. You go against the grain of what you thought your life was going to look like.
Yeah, or hoped.
And there's a lot to unpack when you are suddenly completely turning your life upside down, in effect, and cutting off the future that you thought you were going to have, and now creating that new path. As exciting as it is, that it comes with a lot of uncertainty. But one of the things that I share in my story with Broken, so our book Broken was about stories from women who are breaking ancestral chains and generational cycles to create a brighter future for themselves and their families. And so what we really wanted to portray in this book, and one of the things that I wanted to share in my chapter, was that this idea, a lot of people think that, they call it coming from a broken home. If people get divorced, your home is now broken.
Yeah.
Right. And that my children now come from a broken home. And I've spoken with my children about this. And the thing is, our home was already broken before I left. In fact, leaving my marriage was actually the thing that allowed us all, including my ex, to find ourselves in a new way of being. Their children are happier now with, because mum and dad aren't fighting anymore. I'm a lot happier. My ex is pursuing his life the way he wants. And at the end of the day, pursuing that opportunity to be who I was meant to be, to have the career that I was meant to have, to do the things that lit me up. sets an example for the children as well, that they don't have to settle for the status quo, and that they don't have to stay in a relationship that's making them miserable or unhappy for the sake of the children, or because that's the way it's always been done. And part of sharing this story was also to shine a light for all of the other women out there like me, because I know there are a lot of women who get to, they're around 40, when we become women of a certain age, who have married young and find themselves in a situation where they've outgrown those relationships, or it just doesn't fit right anymore. And there is so much shame and there is so much guilt that we carry.
Yep.
And having that opportunity to see other people making those hard decisions and flourishing afterwards as a result of, choosing themselves, I think is such an important story to share for other women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree.
And men. And
exactly. When people tell me, oh, but isn't it time? Shouldn't you get moving? I said, no. I often jokingly say, I skipped my first divorce.
yeah. And I mean, to be honest, 20-year-old me never thought she was going to get divorced.
No.
That wasn't what I wanted. That wasn't what I went into my marriage thinking I was going to do. But looking at where I am now, I can't imagine that relationship wasn't the same as it was before, and I can't imagine living the rest of my life not allowing myself to be the things that I want to be, and not setting the example for my children that they can be anything that they want to be, that they can live the lives that light them up and pursue those things. But also then in the wider context, sharing, my family was actually surprisingly supportive, considering that I had been so afraid as well of becoming a statistic, right? Being afraid to tell my family that it actually, again, a lot of the fears that we have around breaking those societal expectations and that status quo, a lot of that are these internal things. There are internal fears, there are internal beliefs about what other people are going to think of us. And it isn't actually always true, which brings us back to that questioning. Is this true? Is this something that is real, or is this just something that I believe that I don't need to carry forward? And sometimes when we make those decisions, we realize that the other people around us are a lot less judgmental than we expected. Obviously, some people are judgmental, but the thing is that, again, some of the reason why people are judgmental is because it then shines a light or a mirror and holds it up in front of them, and it makes them uncomfortable about their own situations and their own decisions and choices that they did or didn't make.
Exactly. And that's it, right? Because so many of us, we feel sort of pressured into taking over the family business, or being the stay-at-home mom that allows the husband to shine. And it's slowly turning around where women have equal opportunities in the business force, or at least that's what we are calling it, because in practice what I'm seeing is that it's still not equal. So there are still lots of fights to be fought, but also you need to have children, and if you don't have children as a woman, it's sort of like you failed being a woman, because a woman's job is to produce children. And all of these outdated beliefs that are either a part of society or a part of your family or both, that we sort of feel caught up in, stuck in. And it takes courage to stand up and admit to yourself firstly, and then to the outside world, this is not working for me. this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. The way this is now showing up in my life, it's making me miserable. I've had multiple clients who didn't really want to have children, but their partner really wanted to have children. So they sort of let themselves be convinced to have children, and then found themselves regretting that choice and feeling like I cannot talk about this, because how can I say as a mother, I wish my children were never born? People judge you for that. If you say things like that, that's the worst thing a mother can say. But what if it's your true feelings, right? What if that is just reality? And does that make you a bad mom? No, it means that you made a choice based upon something that wasn't feeling right for you, and these are the consequences of it. But our society can be extremely harsh when it comes to things like this, can be very judgmental, and it can be very difficult to be that trailblazer, to end a marriage saying this is not working for me, because you might be flourishing but I'm slowly dying, and to indeed think I want to set an example for my children, or maybe even admit, well, I need to divorce and I need to leave my children with my husband, hoping he might find a better mother for my children, because I'm clearly not that person, how horrible that might sound, and I need to do my thing, and then have that not be something very negative that people need to judge you for.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you were talking about also the decision to not have children, because another one of our authors in the third book in our series, Burned, which was about women who have overcome their fears to speak their truth and share their wisdom. And it was very much focused on like overcoming that witch wound and that fear of being seen and heard. One of our authors shared a story very much like that, that she knew that she didn't want to have children. And there was a lot of societal pressure for her to have children. They're like, you're a woman of a certain age, don't you think it's time for you to get married and have children? And for her to stand in her truth and say, this is not for me, and I'm okay with that, this isn't something that I want, again, she was disrupting that status quo, because everybody says this is what the path is and this is what you need to be doing. And she said, this isn't for me.
Exactly.
And that she wanted to be trailblazing that path for other women who also don't necessarily want to have children, who are consciously choosing not to have children. And again, this is also part of that shift in society and that desire for women to become recognized as being equal. Like you said, there really still isn't a lot of equality when it comes to business, but that women have the right and the ability in this modern day and age to choose between whether they want to have children, whether they don't, whether they want to have a career, whether they don't. And not all women have the same opportunities depending on where you live in the world or where you come from or your background or whatever. But this is one of the things that we are all trying to fight for and shine a light on, is that ability for each and every woman to make that choice for herself.
Yes, exactly. Just like, well, okay, why should I be the one that stays home? Why can't my husband stay home and take care of the children? Maybe we both want children, but why can I not be the breadwinner, and you will be the houseman instead of the housewife, right? So it's indeed, and that's disrupting the status quo, right? Where you look at how things have always been done and then measure it up to what you want and what you need, and then make choices based upon that that might go against how it's always been done, and then not feeling shame about it, but owning it and showing that it can be done in a different way. And there are areas where we see that as normal. Take recipes, for instance. family recipes, and recipes that have been handed down from mom to mom to mom to mom about, let's say, baking an apple pie. And so this is our family recipe for baking an apple pie, and this is how we've always done, and this is how you bake an apple pie, period. That is true for that generation, but there are so many different apple pie recipes out there, and um, my way is not the only way. And we do accept, oh well, yeah, okay, so my husband's family has a different apple pie recipe, and we can try it out, and oh, that's also yummy, and maybe next time we make that one. Or let's go crazy and let's go on the internet and Google a completely different apple pie recipe and try that one, and that's okay, right? Because we recognize, okay, exactly, there are multiple ways of baking an apple pie. It's not one way, and that's law. So here we are accepting these things, but in general, in essence, for our life, it is exactly the same. It's not because in our grandparents or maybe great 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 grandparents' time, um, doing it in this order is normal, or being a stay-at-home mom that facilitates everything for the husband. Yeah, it might be true in their era, in the time that they lived in, but they also didn't have television, they didn't have a telephone, they didn't have a car, and that was also very normal. So we've modernized and upgraded we everything, right? We have now ended up in an era where we can basically do everything with our phone. We can start our car with our phone, we can pay with our phone, we can take pictures, we can watch television, we can also call with our phone. So and that's the most normal thing in the world. But upgrading our beliefs, upgrading the way we look at things, or encouraging people to be unique, to be who they really are, that is still, I think, an area where a lot of work still needs to be done.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I think part of this ongoing shift and change comes with the recognition that the concept of gender roles is very outdated. It's very heteronormative. It's very much relies on this belief that the only kinds of relationships are between men and women, right? And it's interesting when you start looking at other kinds of relationships, and particularly when you're looking at same-sex relationships, there are no gender roles. There are just jobs that need to be done. So when you're talking about, children being with a stay-at-home mom or maybe a stay-at-home dad instead, when you are in a relationship where it's two men or two women, which one of them is the stay-at-home mom?
Exactly.
Right? Like there are still bins that need to be put out. There are still meals that need to be cooked. There is still grocery shopping that needs to be done. There are still children to raise, or, animals to feed, or whatever it is. And it's not anybody's job because of a gender role. It's just a job that needs to be done. And it's a division of labor, and it's an opportunity to collaborate as a team. And I think this is one of the things that, again, we'll continue to see shifting and changing in society as we continue to change our views on gender, and how gender doesn't necessarily define who we have to be or what we have to do in terms of the roles or the hats that we wear or the ways that we show up in the world. That it's actually okay for us to pick and choose the labels that we wear, or to choose no labels at all, and just to actually say, well, this is who I am. These are all of the parts of me. This, and you just take me as I am. And this is what I like, and this is what I don't like. And it's as simple as that.
Yes, exactly. I wholeheartedly agree. And that's why it's so important that we disrupt this status quo, and that we are blazing our own trail, because the whole world is shifting. Everything's shifting. Everything is changing, and it needs to change. Everything needs to change in order to go to wherever the hell we are going. So we need to disrupt, and we need to forge our own path, and we need to step into our own uniqueness, own our story, own who we are, and then not be afraid of letting it out into the world. But for a lot of people, this is a very difficult step. And I think mostly it's fear related, fear of what will other people say? What will other people think? Will I be good enough to do this? Who am I to disrupt this status quo? All these kinds of fears or limiting beliefs are, I think, what's stopping people. What do you think?
Oh, I agree. There, so much of it comes back to who am I to be, yeah, to be blazing this trail? Who am I to have the audacity to step outside and color outside the lines? And there is so much fear that holds people back from allowing themselves to step into their own brilliance, to step into their zone of genius, to shine as gloriously as possible and to blaze those trails, because they are worried about what other people are going to think of them, and that imposter syndrome of who am I to be the one who is driving this change. And so many of the stories that we showcased in Burned in particular were about that fear of, overcoming those fears of being visible, those fears of being seen, those fears of making different choices and stepping out of the societally prescribed roles that we're supposed to, the jobs that we're supposed to have, or the people we're supposed to be with, or the things that we believe and the religions that we follow, or, whatever it is that, we really are, so much of the work comes back to working out how to overcome these fears and how to really work through that shadow work that comes up when we feel unsafe, when we feel afraid, when we feel that apprehension and that resistance, even though there is something deep inside us burning and saying, this is what you're supposed to do, this is the path you're supposed to follow. And we allow that fear to block us and get in the way. And so much of the work that we need to do is around releasing that fear and allowing ourselves to let that societal expectation fall away, to let all of those fears, and it's not that the fears ever truly disappear. It's that we learn to work with them and work through them and step past them. We learn to acknowledge them and recognize where they came from, recognize the root causes, and then allow ourselves to feel that fear, to allow it to wash over us, but not to let it stop us in our tracks.
Exactly. Yes, I totally agree with that. So it's a whole different way of thinking. We need to realize that it's okay to be who we feel that we are. And it's also okay to be completely confused about who you think you are, because a lot of us are in that confusion, and we are searching for clarity around well, who am I actually, or what is my purpose here? And I've also learned that for some people there is no clear purpose, and that's okay too. So I think everything stands and falls with, well, now really discovering who you are, what your wants and needs are, and what the life that suits you best would look like, without succumbing to fears, without being influenced negatively by the people around you, societal expectations, and being bold and brave enough to do your thing, which is still very difficult and scary for a lot of people, right?
Yes, I love that you just used the words bold and brave, because there is so much goodness that comes when we allow ourselves that bravery, that courage to just do the thing anyway. And I heard this quote once that basically said the difference between fear and excitement, or fear and courage, is remembering to breathe.
I love that one. Yes, and it's very true, because that is, I think, the natural response of our body, right? When we fear, we do, we sort of freeze, and we hold our breath, while fear and courage, it's still feeling the fear, but it's doing it anyway. It's not letting yourself be held back because of the fear that we're feeling, but seeing, okay, yes, this is extremely scary. I know, I know, I know. I have these conversations with myself around this that go something like this. Oh, I'm scared. I'm really scared. Do I really want to do this? I'm really sure. And my other self says, I know, honey, with your background, completely understandable. Everything you went through, the unsafety, I completely get it. But you know what? You're not alone. I'm here. We're here together. We got this. We can do this. So let's tackle this one thing at a time. What are you most afraid of? That I don't really know, actually. Okay, well, yeah, that's something that can happen. So what would you need to move past this fear? And it's like knowing that everything will work out well in the end. Okay, that's a tall order. That's not something that I can promise. But what I can promise is that it will work out the way it's supposed to be working out. It will work out in your highest good. It will work out in the best way possible for you specifically. And what that way is going to be, you won't know until it actually happens. But trust in the goodness of what is about to happen. Feel, instead of scared, feel excited about the possibilities, about what could be happening, what could be coming your way, and try to start of fantasize about it and think, well, what if this happens? Oh, that would be amazing. Yes, wouldn't you think? Yeah, that would be really amazing. And maybe this could happen as well. Oh, yes, that would be awesome. Yeah, don't I know it, girl? And you can have these types of conversations with yourself. I often think if people could listen in when I'm talking to myself, they would just either shit themselves, pee their pants, or think she needs to be locked up.
Yeah. I love that. But it is that internal dialogue, and it's that allowing yourself to explore all the possibilities. So much of it comes down to the way that we think and the way that we approach things. And if we are approaching it from that fear-based mindset of, oh my gosh, everything's going wrong, terrible things are happening to me, nothing ever works out right, then we're so focused on the negative outcomes that is all we see, because that's what we're looking for.
Yes.
And when we are able to shift that mindset and start thinking, okay, well, this was unexpected, but what are the other possibilities? Where could I go from here? And what are the alternate scenarios? How could this be working out for my highest good? What new opportunities are coming my way? What do I need to learn from this experience?
Mm-hmm.
How could this possibly be benefiting me? And when we allow ourselves, again, that curiosity, that openness to see those experiences through a different lens, even when they're awful, even when they're traumatic, even when they are devastating, there's always something that we can take from that experience. There is always something that we learn. There is always some kind of gift, even if we can't see it in the moment while we're going through it.
The silver lining, yes.
There always is, whether it's because we learn that we are surprisingly resilient in the face of complete chaos, whether it's that we learn that we have support systems that we didn't realize that we had, because actually in a crisis, suddenly the people who really mattered were there for you. Whether it's, that you learn that you have some kind of strength or some kind of other skill or ability that you didn't previously realize that you possessed. There's always something to be learned from every experience.
Yes.
And it really does just come back to how we choose to look at that. We can either be the victim, or we get to be the survivor, or the person who has triumphed over adversity.
Yes.
And so then when we bring that back to societal expectation and that fear of breaking the rules, we either get to be the kid who gets sent to detention because they broke the rules, or we get to be that visionary who saw a different, better way to do things, who then becomes that new thought leader, or becomes that person who is setting the trends rather than breaking the rules.
Exactly. That reminds me of a quote that goes, I think something like this: whether you can or you can't, you're right. And what that basically means is
Yes.
you will always find the evidence. If you are scared and you believe you can't, you will find evidence that supports that belief. But if you feel like, well, I'm excited for the possibility that I might figure out a way that I can do this, then you will also find the things that will support that way of thinking. So you're always right, because the thing that you focus on is what grows, and you will always find evidence and support for the things that you're focusing on. So choose wisely is, I think, the message that is an important one here. You need to be very conscious of what you think about and what you put your believes in, because that is what you will get back. But there are basically two ways of doing anything in life. It's the fear-based way or the love-based way. And the fear-based way, all of us have met the fear-based way in our lives in one form or another. It's when you don't do something because you're scared of it, or you do something because you're scared of something, and that's the fear-based way. So you let your fears drive your decision making. The other way, the love-based fear, it requires more courage. It really requires you to step out of the comfort zone, the status quo, the familiar, to make decisions that you feel in your heart are in your best interest. Like ending a marriage when you thought you would be together forever, or starting your own business in an economy where every business was bankrupting and everybody told you you were crazy. Like when I started my business 13 years ago. So it's trusting that the universe works for you, even when you cannot see it, even when you cannot see the grand plan, but trusting that things happen for a reason, and that it will all work out the best way possible when it's done. And that's faith.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more. It is that belief, that faith, and that trust that everything is going to work out the way that it's supposed to, that everything is working out in our highest good, but also that, when we do approach things with love, when we come into any experience with an attitude of gratitude and joy and love and happiness, and we anchor in and we look for those moments of joy, those things that we can be grateful for, then those things multiply. Exactly what you said. What we focus on expands. And the more that we anchor in those positive emotions, even in negative situations, when we think, oh, I'm so grateful that, even though this situation didn't turn out the way that I'd hoped, that, it wasn't worse, or that, these were the unexpected things that came out of it. And we look for those silver linings that you were talking about earlier. it really does shift our perspective, and we really do start to see that there is no one right way. There is no one right path, that we do get to forge and blaze those trails as we go.
Yes.
And that we get to, really try and experience new things and new possibilities and new ways of doing things that, are constantly lighting us up or teaching us new things or giving us the opportunity to create those tidal waves of change in those areas that we believe in, or that we really want to actually, see that tangible change. And we have to be willing to shift that perspective and take the action to go after those things that we want.
Yes. And sometimes that just means that we need a little bit of help, because we all have blind spots for ourselves when it comes to certain things. And I often compare it to when you want to lose weight, usually as a woman, or when you want to gain muscle, usually as a man. Could also be the other way around. But you can go to the gym, you can go by yourself, you can do Pilates lessons, or do weightlifting, or do the cross trainer, or whatever the gym has to offer. And you will probably see some results eventually, but if you want to have the exact results that you want within time frame that you're feeling comfortable with, it is highly advisable to use a personal trainer. Someone that can make a personal plan for you, and that can tell you exactly how many repetitions of this, and maybe do that, and do such, and do and maybe this meal plan, or these supplements, or whatever it is, to get you the best results possible. And that's what a good mentor or a good coach does for you. You can do everything yourself, but the road will probably be long, it will be very bumpy, there will be a lot of trial and error, and you can sort of take some shortcuts when you let yourself be helped by the right person. And that is an important distinction, because I think we've all also had experiences where we put our trust in someone with pretty words that promised us golden mountains, that were the mountains that we were wanting to have. And then they just didn't deliver on their promise, and we felt horribly disappointed. And it causes us to not trust a next time. And that's really shitty. It has happened to me. It probably happened to you. There are so many people that this happened to. And it starts with, I think, doing some research into the person, listening to talks like this, and seeing if you can find yourself in the way they talk, in the opinions that they express, in the way they look, in maybe their quirkiness or their seriousness, or however they show up. And trust in your resonance, in your inner resonance. If you are listening to a talk like this and you think, oh, yes, and you're nodding along, and you think, yes, 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 and you're starting to get really enthusiastic, please hit the subscribe button, and please let us know in the comment section what your biggest insight was, or your biggest head shake. But that usually is a good indicator telling you, oh, this might be someone to further investigate. While I've also had people where I thought, oh my God, I hate your voice. You might be really good at what you're doing, but I cannot listen to you. I hate your voice. And that's also good, because that just means that this is not the person for you. And you need a different type of person, and you need to trust in that. So I've been really, really loving our conversation, and I think we hit upon some amazing points. And if you agree, it would be wonderful if you could share this episode so more people can enjoy it. But I can also imagine that you, listener, viewer out there, might want to know, well, how can I reach you, or how can I reach Tracey specifically? So where can they find you, Tracey?
Okay, so probably the best place to connect with me would be through my link tree. So that is linktr.ee/WWIC. that has links to all of my socials. If you're on Facebook, you can find me under Tracey Brown. You can find me on LinkedIn, also under Tracey Brown. I'm on Instagram at Vibrant Coach, if you're looking for me and would like to connect on Instagram. And I mean, if you are somebody who has a story and would like to share your story, we do have some incredible collaborative book opportunities coming up over this next year. We've got some fabulous stories, definitely about shifting the status quo as well, particularly in relation to women's health and well-being, and also working with the cycles of the moon. But we constantly have new titles available, and we have stories that we share, and we are looking for incredible women who have knowledge, wisdom, and power that they would like to share with the collective to help, disrupt that status quo. But also, if you are keen to connect on a personal level, or you would like to find out more about how you can publish your book, do hit me up for that as well. That's something that I love to talk about and would be very happy to discuss with everyone. So
I love that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And thanks for letting your pussycat come and say hi too.
Yes, she apparently wants to say hi or goodbye to everybody because she thinks it's snuggle time with mommy and you are done working now. So come with me now. That's her message for today. But yeah, I'll make sure that your links are below the video in the show notes so that people can find you and can connect with you. I loved our talk here today. I want to really thank you for coming on the show and being a wonderful guest and talking about all these important things. And I also want to thank you, watcher, viewer, listener, for your ongoing support for my channel, for showing up, for watching the videos, for commenting, for liking. It means the world to me. And for right now, I think I have nothing left to add than just to wish you a really wonderful rest of your day and expressing my hope that you will join me again next week for another wonderful talk with another wonderful person.